亲爱的中国朋友，大家好，我是 HAVAS CEO Yannick BOLLORE。新年快乐，祝大家新的一年旺到福到，过年喜庆。
Il fallait bien qu'il y ait une petite surprise quand même.
This has been very hard. Huh?
Well, congratulations, Yannick, very much. I think the reason why I invited Yannick was first because the agency, and he's going to tell us, has been established for quite a while. Actually, I was surprised, I didn't know, in China, and also because there's some news lately. You probably noticed that Yannick was part of the official journey of Emmanuel Macron in China, accompanying many other business men and women and men, actually. So the first question is actually, how has been, I mean, what is what you took from this trip with Emmanuel Macron, and can you give us a few facts and figures about what HAVAS and Vivendi stands for actually in China today?
Okay, so thank you very much, Laure. Thank you very much, everyone, for having me today. It's a great honor to participate to the China Connect 8th edition, if I'm correct. So thank you very much. China is very, very, very important to HAVAS. We have started our journey in China 32 or 33 years ago in the 80s out of Hong Kong. Today we have 800 colleagues in Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Hong Kong and Taiwan, and we are growing very fast. We also have signed a partnership, like a joint venture with a local giant in China called GIMC, which is one of the leaders in the independent sector of advertising with 6,500 people. You said it. I had the privilege to be part of the French delegation with President Macron to meet with President Xi and his delegation at the beginning of January this year. It was honestly very, very inspiring. We had the blessing from President Macron to our new joint venture with our Chinese partnership, which I think it's more than a sign of good luck. It's a sign of commitment from France to support his companies to develop themselves in China. You have to bear in mind that for some of our clients, China as a local market is becoming their first market. So some French companies, their first country when they look at their country's portfolio is China. And for all the other companies, a top-tier country, and it's growing very, very fast. We have the same on the, on the other hand, what I can see by discussing with our Chinese friends, and maybe you will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think many of the Chinese companies today that used to grow domestically on the internal Chinese market are now trying to expand outside of China on an international basis. This is a real commitment. But for, as we say, for Western companies, for US or European companies to understand China, it can be complex sometimes. So we need this type of platform to understand better each other's. It's the same in the other way around. It's complex for Chinese company to find the right partner. So I believe that HAVAS, by its own companies and by the joint venture we have created with GIMC, will be the best partner to drive communication for Chinese brand outside of China and for international brand in China. I also had the opportunity, thanks to President Macron and the French government, to meet with the people in charge in China of the One Belt, One Road initiative, which is, of course, a spectacular project, which I think I hope will accelerate the commerce between the West and the East. It was honestly quite an inspiring trip, and I go to China twice a year, and that's true that it's different when you go with the president. I mean, it's a different feeling.
Tell us the insider story. What it is?
Well,
how much different?
First, you have no traffic. I mean, because they block all the highway. I mean, we went to visit the special center, which was maybe 2 hours away from. You know, when I looked at Google Maps, what the equivalent was 2 hours from the hotel to the. And in 20 minutes we went there, everything was blocked. So, I mean, it's quite different. But you meet very interesting people. I mean, people were super open. I think from a Chinese standpoint, what I understood is that in the today's world, France has a key role to play, because the dialogue with the US is becoming quite complex. I mean, I don't want to mention what happened yesterday with the trade tax. I'm sure you've covered it already. In Europe, with the Brexit, they are trying to invest in continental Europe, and with the turmoil in the politics in the other European biggest country, I think France could be a very good, is perceived to be as a very good entry point, a very good gateway for Chinese nationals that want to invest in the West, meaning Europe and the US. So I really believe that we can do. We can continue to do better together between France and China, and that's why I'm super involved and committed myself and engaged in developing our Chinese presence.
And going back actually to your core business, I would say advertising, communication as a whole. The advertising business, I mean, is quite recent, I would say, in China versus the West. What are the 2, 3, key differences that you can see in between the Chinese landscape in advertising versus the Western one? I mean, if you had 2 or 3 to pick, and how much have you seen it evolve? Because we know that they progress quite rapidly. So, what are for you the key milestone, I would say, and what really sticks to your mind?
So, thank you. We often say that when it comes to the advertising business, maybe the Chinese advertising is a little bit behind. I'm not sure that's true. Maybe in the past, you're right. I would say that Chinese advertising has catched up brilliantly in terms of every aspect of communication, even creativity. I have a small film I wanted to show you, the last commercial we did for Huawei. I'm sure you will like it, but maybe just an element of context. The mobile is the mobile phone is obviously becoming the first screen. So advertising on mobile is key, and is a key to drive business for our clients. And I would say that maybe the Chinese are a little bit ahead of the industry in terms of mobile communication, with all the great social networks, with the mobile payments, all the sharing economy. So I think we have things to learn in our space when it comes to communicate on the mobile, not only on the digital space, but on the mobile economy. I would say they are maybe ahead, and even the creativity. I mean, I want to show. I don't know if we have time, the 2 minutes to show the movie, and you will understand what I think about the good creativity of the Chinese agencies. So this is for Huawei.
Whenever you start to fade, just think of me next to you in the darkness. I'll lay beside you until you wake.
Fortunately, we have Dr. Chen, the world-renowned pediatric neurosurgeon, who will take over from here.
The patient is only 6 years old. I have concerns about anesthesia.
Regarding this 6-year-old boy patient, it is absolutely necessary to complete the excision.
When I start feeling lonely at the end of the day.
You nervous? No.
When it's hard to smile and it's easier to cry, I know I'll feel better if you call me tonight. Whenever you go away, I'll be the one at the edge of the darkness. I'll leave the light on when it gets late, so you
我和妈妈在家都能跟你吃草，所以我派我熊熊保护你。
I'll lay beside you until you wake, so you always know where the love is.
来，给你看小熊的照片。
小熊嘞
How are you feeling today? Good. Did you sleep well last night? Good.
Just hold me till it's time to leave. Whenever you go away,
对不起，
I'll be the one at the
派他去
edge
照顾
of the
更需要照顾的人。
darkness. I'll leave the light on when it gets late, so you always
小熊
know
一定会
where
保护
the
它。
love is. Whenever you go away, so you always know where the love is. You always know where the love is. You always know where the love is.
Creative-wise, I think this it's creating it's driving brand preference clearly.
Since when do you have the account? Since when are you working with Huawei?
We're working. I mean, many agencies are working with Huawei, and they asked us how can we drive brand preference in today's world. We believe emotion is very important, and I mean our job at HAVAS is to be the best at creating and conveying emotion, which is not very hard because we are talking to humans. So it's not only about AI or algorithm, but I mean that's the magics of groups like us.
You just mentioned before a few industries in which you're interested. Can you tell us, the one that you're the most bullish about in China right now, and why? I mean, on a personal standpoint, I would say, and again for the HAVAS Group and Vivendi.
I mean, I think everybody's bullish on every industry in China. I mean, you can see your conference is very packed, and many people want to attend on everything related to China. I mean, I would say that I'm most bullish on every industry that relates to the rise of middle class. So I would say the first industry that comes to my mind is the automotive industry. Of course, I think 1/4 of the automobiles of the cars are sold in China today, and a lot of first buyers will arrive on the market. There will be also the transition between thermical cars to electric vehicles. That's going to be massive, and I think China might lead the way in the clean energy powered vehicle in the near future. I also believe, and I want to mention the entertainment industry, because with not only the rise of the middle class, but the rise of the GDP, people will spend more, I think, in entertainment. I mean, music, videos, video games. Our sister company, Universal Music, just signed a deal with Tencent to create a streaming platform, Tencent Music. Like Spotify. So I think the entertainment industry will see as well a growth in the coming years.
There was also a question. All organizations actually are facing, maybe a little bit less than they did a couple of years ago, in terms of leadership when it comes to the local or regional offices in Asia, in China. So talking empowerment, I mean, that's something that is not only much talked about, but it's really mainstream. How do you do with precisely the way you empower your local teams in China? And then it's interesting to know whether the Chinese are also letting you a lot of empowerment when it comes to precisely handling their account here.
Yeah, it's very funny that you asked the question. We just had many discussions with the local Chinese operation over the last couple of years about what is the level of empowerment they need to have, and I think HAVAS is considered as the fastest moving agency in the traditional advertising world. And we had discussion with our new Chinese partner, and I would say he's very happy with everything, but the only comment I would say he had formulated, maybe the only criticism, he said, "Oh, you need to move faster." I said, "Come on, we already move fast enough. they are moving so fast. I mean, it's crazy. The pace is so fast, which I'm not. I mean, it's good, but sometimes when you go too fast, you can make some mistakes. But I think the pace is much more important there. And they also need to have a big empowerment. I mean, China is today the second largest economy. It will become the first, I think, in the during this century. I don't know when exactly. And they need to decide by themselves. They need to be empowered. I think it's very important that China is not part of the APAC regions, but it's a region by itself. I mean, it's so big. So we need to empower China. I think it's very important, not only for them to go fast, but to make their own decisions and I mean, they feel the market, so that's what we have decided to do. And Chinese are discovering the world today. So, I mean, it's still very early stage for Chinese companies that are going worldwide. I think they need to build relationship with some partners that they trust. I mean, the relationship is an asset. It's not just about being friends. It's having someone you trust that can drive your business, that will be loyal and faithful. So, I mean, I think China will come to the same conclusion. I mean, we need to find and to trust our Chinese partner, and they will need to find good partners and to trust them and to empower them to develop their business. At least if they want to go fast in the West, they will need to have access to cultural insights and stuff like that.
But do you have some examples of precisely, you know, maybe a lack of empowerment that the group might have given to your local office and that led actually to sort of failure, and that you just do remember and figured out that afterwards, you know, it was really necessary to let it go? Or because I think every group did experience it. So it's more about, you know, knowing if there are sometimes some, you know, big examples of precisely, wow, I mean, what a mistake to have
I don't have any failure in mind. I mean, I'm not saying we never failed, that's not true, but I don't have any failure in mind. But all the discussion we have, they are asking for empowerment and trust. So I think it's more about how to fine-tune the right level of empowerment, because also they need to get the support from the global. So it's not just leaving people on the side on their own. It's how can we find the right way to interact between the global level and local level. But I think, I mean, in general, not only in China, I mean, everywhere in the world, I think a relationship is working well between someone who reports to someone else, or to an agency, or to a company that reports to another one. When the people reporting into are feeling more supported than they feel they have to report. I mean, it's important that the managers, in general, understand that they need to support the people that are reporting into them. So I think it's really a two-way relationship in terms. It's not just who's reporting into me, it's also who I'm in charge to support.
Just before giving you know, the audience the opportunity to ask you some questions, you just told me a few minutes before a personal story about precisely the link with your group, your family group with China. Can you just remind it to the audience?
Yeah, I said to you, I have a very special connection with China. I mean, my family has a very special connection with China because my great-great-great-grandfather, René Bolloré, started his paper factory in Bretagne, in the west of France, by stealing, I would say, a secret, not stealing, but by discovering, I would say, how Chinese, I think there is prescription, it's almost 200 years old, but by discovering how Chinese were making thin paper. And when he came back to France, he settled its own paper manufactory with this Chinese type of technology. It was called a technology at this time. And he has disrupted the paper business by doing thin papers, he was doing large books and stuff like that. And thanks to a Chinese, I would say, technological advantage, we have managed to disrupt an industry in France and to create a group that has lasted for now 196 years.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice story. Definitely.
So thanks, China. Thanks very much.
Any questions? It's yours. Take the micro.
I would like to come back to the part about the creativity in China. You said that the Chinese creativity in advertising is getting better. What about Chinese creativity in mobile marketing? I mean, the marketing ecosystem there is very special, but do you find creative ideas there or strategies, or for instance, the usage of data that you think is something that the whole HAVAS group can learn from?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question. Thank you for asking. I would say clearly, when it comes to everything related to mobile, China is ahead of the competition. So, had to do mobile payment, I think China is number one. Social networks, I mean, I use WeChat as everyone. I mean, I think the user experience is just great. In terms of everything that you can do in the sharing economy with mobile, how people are using data, are converting big data in smart data to provide real services to people. So honestly, I'm really amazed and really had a lot of admiration for everything that Chinese are doing with when it comes to mobile. I think they are still a little bit ahead.
Hello, I'm Florent Courreau from JD.com, and I'd like to ask you a question on the branding side of these Chinese tech giant that you just mentioned. So Tencent, Alibaba, how do you view their brand building efforts at the moment? And do you think these brands will come and impact the opinions of European customers in Europe?
Yeah, I think those brands in China are super powerful. I mean, that's true that French people or European people, they don't really know what is Tencent. Maybe they heard about Alibaba with a single day, and they heard about Jack Ma who goes beyond just China because it has been publicly listed on the New York stock market. But I think they are not very well known, those brands. I mean, Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, and Huawei are not very well known to European citizens. But I think, I mean, their primary focus was China. I mean, China is such a big market. I mean, I can understand that when you have such a big domestic market, you want to develop it. It's still very recent, I mean, because I believe WeChat has been created just in 2011. So we are just talking about a company that is not even 7 years old. I mean, Huawei is, I think, just Huawei by itself is bigger than the three other VAT. Well, it's huge companies. I think what I've understood from my different visits there is that the Chinese government has asked these companies to develop on an international basis. So now they are starting to look at the West. I can see we are working with Huawei, so they have some interaction with it. They want to develop their brand. But of course, I mean, the share of voice on the mobile sector, because of Apple and Samsung, it's very hard and very expensive today. When it comes to Tencent, I think it's going to be difficult because I would say the market share in social networks is pretty well established with Facebooks and Instagram and Snap and maybe Twitter. In terms of search, it's going to be very hard to disrupt Twitter. So I think it's going to be a very tough battle between the Chinese and the American giants to try to conquer the world. I think there are space for everyone. That's my view. But I think communication will play a huge part because the question will be at the end of the day, because I don't want to say when you compare a Huawei phone to a Samsung phone to an Apple phone, I mean the difference will be more, I would say, on the brand preference. So I think the brand will have something very important to create in its relationship with the consumers. The companies, I think, that will win, the companies that will be perceived as the most meaningful to the consumers. So it's not going to be only about the product by itself, but what the product means to the consumers. So I think in the future, companies need to create meaningful brands. And our mission at HAVAS is to help them becoming meaningful. But it's the same type of thinking and approach for people. I think politics today needs to be meaningful to the people who are voting for them. So I think it's the next decade will be around meaningfulness.
That's your last word?
Yeah,
It's a great word.
It's a great last word.
Anyone wants to ask another question? Because I would keep it like that. Anything else? Any other questions? No?
Thank you very much.
Well, thanks very much,
Thank you,
Yannick.
Thank you for having me.